allow me to sincerely thank all of you who have subscribed so far to this channel, especially since my wife and I did the videos about her DNA test. We've watched our subscribership just constantly rise, and we've seen at least one person an hour subscribe to the channel. It's been amazing. We're very grateful. It is a true story. YouTube will not pay us anymore after February 20th for our hard work in doing this channel if we don't have 1,000 subscribers. They think that we're not worth it if we don't have 1,000. So thank you for everybody who's supporting us. So much gratitude. With that being said, I want to read a comment from someone I think who actually was one of our more recent subscribers, who goes by the name of Me DNA. I mean, that's the perfect name for this channel. So I made a video called My Heritage, Does My Mom Think She's White? So if that sounds interesting, just type it in my search box on my channel and watch the video. It's good. It's where I had my mom stand next to me and I said, I'm gonna ask you a question. When I hit record, just answer it honestly. I hit record and I say, do you think you're white? And she barely hesitates before saying, no, I'm not white. And then she tells her explanation of it. It's interesting, and it shows you a glimpse of an American perspective on things. So Me DNA commented on that video and said this, quote, both Middle Easterners and Europeans are Caucasians. Your mother looks very Arab, and I myself am much darker than she is, but I have a first cousin who is as pale as you, or maybe more, and we are the same race. Skin color doesn't equal race, end quote. I gotta say that last line again because it's very challenging, and I want to dissect the psychology behind it. It's very difficult for many Americans to hear that. Skin color doesn't equal race. Now, why is that so challenging for Americans to hear that? And even for my mom to see herself as someone who is not white. Now, granted, her mother being of Mexican descent means that my mom is going to be a decent amount Central American, just as I am. I show 21.6% Central American DNA, which, can't we all agree, is a different race than European, right? But as far as how most Americans distinguish race, skin color is one of the easiest places we go to. It's hard. Even now, I think it's challenging to really understand what constitutes as being a different race. We know that we can't just look at someone's nationality and say, oh, they're a different race because they're from that country. We can't say that. We don't know what their ethnicity is. But when we look at their skin color, if they have skin that's darker than most American skin, then chances are they're of some different lineage than, because so many Americans by default are basically Northwestern European. Most people, especially in the South where I'm from, you ask, hey, what's your ethnic background? And they'll say, I'm a bit English, Scottish, Irish, and German. And that's what most people say. And then they'll always say, well, and I'm probably a little bit Native American. They always say that. Though the same people who say that to do the DNA test, they pretty much never are. But that's what they think. And now these DNA tests are proven. I've made a video about that. It's pretty popular on this channel talking about that phenomenon. All right, either way though, the thing is, especially for Americans, if we see someone with noticeably different skin tone than us, we naturally assume that that's a different race. And that's why there's a lot of confusion on if we see someone who is from a country that speaks Spanish, for example. It's very confusing for us. Say someone is Puerto Rican or Cuban. Try asking an American, are Cubans or Puerto Ricans, are they a different race? But even in that comment, the fact of hearing Middle Easterners are Caucasians, I think a lot of Americans struggle to see it that way. I think a lot of Americans even struggle to see someone who's Greek as white. I think it's a struggle. I think that people assume that if you're Greek, you're of a different race. I think there's even people who are Italian that people would think are a different race than white people. They think that's a different race because often Italian people have different features than Northwestern Europeans. So we struggle with that. How do we differentiate what is a different race? And it's not a racist situation. It's a fascination thing. when so many people look alike, and then you got somebody coming in with a different sounding last name, their skin's a different color, we naturally assume that's a different race. And we naturally say, hey, I'm curious, if you don't mind me asking, what's your ethnic background? You have some exotic features. Now, that's kind of part of American culture. Now, some people will say, well, that sounds kind of rude. That sounds kind of intrusive. I think it's just going to the American fascination, that mindset that you're different than me. I can appreciate this. I want to know what it's like to not be like everybody else around me, And, my sister especially grew up hearing that. She's actually in the #1 video on this channel where she and I compare and contrast our DNA results. She went with 23andMe and I went with MyHeritage, and they're a bit different. And you can see her in that. A lot of people say, well, yeah, she definitely looks different than you. Others say, well, actually, she looks more British than you. But her DNA reflects that as well. But in high school and college, people constantly asked her, what's your ethnic background? And then they'd see me and they're like, well, but your brother, he's lighter than you are, And so people were curious. One of my roommates, when I first moved here to Nashville, first time I met him, or first time I saw him, he was playing the violin on stage. And I looked up and I thought, man, that Korean kid is a prodigy. Look at that Korean kid. And of course, the summer before, I did a summer camp in Myongji University in Korea, working with Korean boys, helping them with conversational English. No doubt in my mind he was Korean. Well, a couple months later, not only do I meet him because he ends up living in the same house as me. There's like 5 of us guys. I hear him talk, and he's got the thickest Texas accent. Turns out his father is Mexican-American. His mother is white. But he is a dark-complected guy and his eyes specifically look like they're Asian, the way his genes came out. And so, for example, as I was around him, people just assumed he was Asian. That changed a little bit when they heard him talk. But let me share this story with you. My sister's wedding, about a decade ago, he played the violin at her wedding. And he's sitting next to me at the reception table. This guy, local from Alabama, walks up to him and says, man, let me tell you, the way you play that fiddle, you got some real talent, boy. You're really good at that. And then he said, oh, well, thank you. And then he says, well, if you don't mind me asking, but what are you, Japanese? True story. And so he kind of just laughs, shrugs it off, and says, actually, my dad's Mexican-American, my mom's white. And I heard him say that so many times. People asked him all the time. They assumed he's Asian, then they're even more confused when they find out he's not, and that he's Mexican-American instead, and his mom's, they were very confused by that. I just think that it's part of American culture to be fascinated by anyone who has different physical features than us. And skin color is the first place we go to make that jump and think, oh, this is exotic, this is interesting, I want to know more about it. So, going back to this challenging last line, skin color doesn't always equal race. And to hear that someone who's Middle Eastern is white too, it's challenging for us. Because if I think of someone who's Middle Eastern, or even Jewish, which I would argue that they're of Middle Eastern descent, it's easy to even consider a lot of Jewish people a different race. Now, some people have darker features than others, but ultimately, even now when I think of someone of Middle Eastern descent, it's hard for me to think of them as white, as Caucasian, which is funny because so many people have left comments on that on the videos with my mom, and they'll say that people who are Arab will say, yeah, your mother looks like she's one of us. She looks like she's Arab. And I guess there's the debate too. Well, so are Arab people white? And I've made a video about that, and the consensus was that some are considered not to be, some are. It's still a perception issue, and I think that's ultimately it. No one's ever going to fully agree on this, especially here in America, though. We struggle with the concept that skin color doesn't equal a different race. So, I say this because I'm challenged by it. I'm trying to accept it. That's the way the rest of the world sees things, that skin color isn't a different race. I think most Americans see it differently. I think when we see a noticeably shade of different skin, we think, I'm curious. I wonder what their ethnic background is. And it's a way to celebrate and learn each other. It's a conversation piece. We're fascinated by people who are different than us. I think that's part of the culture of American mindset. But to say to us that skin color doesn't equal a different race, it's even challenging for me to say out loud.